There is a question that nobody is asking. And the fact that nobody is asking it is itself the most important thing I can tell you today. While the entire world, every television channel, every social media platform, every newspaper on earth was focused on Trump, China was moving. Not reacting, not responding, not waiting, moving. Executing a strategy that was designed years ago, tested patiently, and activated at precisely the moment when American political attention was directed somewhere else entirely. My name is Professor Jiang. I have spent 30 years studying the intersection of geopolitical power, economic strategy, and the decisions that powerful nations make when they believe the world is not paying attention. Today, I want to show you what China did. Not what China said, not what China announced, not what China's state media told you, what China actually did. With verified facts, documented data, real numbers. Because the hidden move is always more important than the visible statement. And what China did while everyone watched Trump is one of the most consequential strategic sequences I have observed in 30 years. Do not scroll. Do not skip. Every minute of what I am about to tell you changes how you see the world. Let us begin. Before I go deeper, I have one gift for you. People ask me every day, Professor Jiang, what is real anymore? Because the internet is full of fake success, fake gurus, fake promises. But after 30 years studying money, power, and human behavior, I discovered something dangerous. Most people are not poor because they lack opportunity. They are poor because they are mentally programmed to stay average. That programming controls your decisions, your risks, your income, your entire future. That is exactly why the TPP system was created. Inside, you receive mindset mastery training, advanced wealth strategies, investment fundamentals, a private mastermind community, and a complete success roadmap with instant access to premium video lessons and ebooks. This is not motivation. This is financial re-engineering. And here is why thousands join with confidence. You receive a full 60-day money-back guarantee. Use the system for 2 full months. If your mindset and financial clarity do not transform, you pay absolutely nothing. Zero risk. Complete protection. The investment is $5,399 one time. One decision can change your financial trajectory forever. Do not worry. I already placed the link in the description and pinned comment. This is Professor Jiang. Authentic, calculated, guaranteed. Secure your position now. Now let us get back to what matters. Let me start with something that happened that almost nobody reported correctly. When Trump announced his tariff package, 145% tariffs on Chinese goods, the largest trade barrier between any two major economies in modern history, every camera, every reporter, every analyst was focused on the announcement itself. The press conference, the numbers, the reaction from American business groups, the reaction from consumers, the political calculations. And while all of that attention was fully occupied, China did something quietly. China sold $53 billion in United States Treasury bonds. Let me explain what that means, because most people hear that number and do not feel it. The United States government borrows money to function. It borrows that money by selling treasury bonds, debt instruments, to investors around the world. Those investors lend America money in exchange for a guaranteed return. China holds approximately $750 billion of that debt. $750 billion. That is not an investment. That is leverage. That is a hand on a lever that, if pulled completely, would create a financial crisis in America that no tariff, no sanction, no military posture could quickly resolve. China did not pull the lever. China moved its hand on the lever by $53 billion, and it did it quietly. No announcement, no press conference, no statement. Just a number that appeared in United States Treasury Department transaction data weeks later, when most of the world had moved on to the next Trump headline. That is how China operates. That is the specific strategic behavior that I have been studying for 30 years. China does not react. China positions. There is a profound difference between those two things. Now I want to tell you about something that started in 2015 and has been growing every single year since, and that most people in the Western world have never heard of. It is called CIPS, Cross-Border Interbank Payment System. You know SWIFT. SWIFT is the financial messaging network that connects banks across the world and enables international money transfers. When America sanctions a country by cutting it off from SWIFT, that country loses the ability to conduct normal international financial transactions. It is one of the most powerful economic weapons America possesses. Iran was cut off from SWIFT. Russia was partially cut off from SWIFT after 2022. And China watched both of those events very carefully. Because China understood something that most Western policymakers did not fully appreciate. If America controls the financial plumbing of the world, America can turn off the water for any country at any time. And China decided, quietly, systematically, without dramatic announcement, to build alternative plumbing. CIPS began processing international transactions in 2015. By 2024, more than 100 countries and financial institutions were connected to CIPS. By 2025, the volume of transactions processed through CIPS had grown to a level that, while still smaller than SWIFT, was large enough to be a genuine functional alternative for a growing portion of global trade. This is the hidden infrastructure of a new financial architecture, not replacing SWIFT overnight, not making headlines, just growing, quietly, consistently, every single year. While the world watched Trump's tariff announcements, CIPS processed another day of transactions, and another, and another. Let me now tell you about the petrodollar, because this is the part that connects everything, and this is the part that has genuinely significant implications for every person watching this video, regardless of where you live. In 1974, the United States made an agreement with Saudi Arabia. America would guarantee Saudi security. America would sell Saudi Arabia weapons. America would maintain a military presence in the Gulf region. In return, Saudi Arabia would price its oil exclusively in US dollars. And because Saudi Arabia set the standard, every other major oil producer followed. The result was that every country on earth that needed to buy oil, which is every country on earth that has an economy, needed to hold US dollars to buy that oil, which meant that demand for US dollars was permanently, structurally embedded into the global economy, which meant that America could print dollars, run deficits, borrow money at low rates, and export inflation in ways that no other country on earth could do. The petrodollar system is one of the primary foundations of American global financial power. And in 2023, something happened. Saudi Arabia began accepting Chinese yuan as payment for oil in deals with China. Not all oil, not a complete switch, but a crack. A documented, confirmed, reported crack in a system that had been the foundation of dollar dominance for 50 years. The Wall Street Journal reported it. The facts are verified. And China did not celebrate this publicly. China did not hold a press conference. China simply continued the conversation with Riyadh. Because China understands that you do not need to replace the petrodollar tomorrow. You need to make it slightly less inevitable every single year. Until one day, the alternative has become normal. Now I want to talk about something that I find genuinely fascinating from a strategic analysis perspective. The timing. Every time American political attention has been maximally consumed, whether by Trump's legal battles, by domestic political crises, by the drama of Washington that fills every channel, China has used that window to advance specific strategic objectives quietly. This is not speculation. This is a documented pattern. In 2021, during the chaos of the post-election period in America, China signed the Comprehensive Agreement on Investment with the European Union. A major diplomatic achievement that positioned China as a reliable economic partner for Europe at a moment when the transatlantic relationship was strained. In 2023, during the peak of American congressional dysfunction and debt ceiling crisis, China brokered the normalization agreement between Saudi Arabia and Iran. China brokered a Middle East peace deal. Think about what that means. For 50 years, Middle East diplomacy ran through Washington, through American power, American guarantees, American leverage. China stepped into that space, quietly, at a moment when Washington was paralyzed by its own domestic politics. In 2025, as Trump's tariff war created maximum noise and maximum global attention on American trade policy, China simultaneously conducted diplomatic visits to 14 European capitals, deepening economic relationships at the exact moment when those governments were frustrated with American unpredictability. The pattern is consistent. The pattern is deliberate. The pattern has a name in Chinese strategic thinking. It is called the strategy of using the opponent's force against itself. When America creates noise, China creates signal. When America generates uncertainty, China offers stability. When America's leadership becomes a question mark, China presents itself as the answer. Let me now explain the Belt and Road Initiative in a way that most Western analysis completely misses. Most people understand Belt and Road as an infrastructure program. China loans money to developing countries to build roads, ports, railways, power plants. The infrastructure connects those countries to Chinese trade networks. China gains economic influence. That analysis is correct, but incomplete. The deeper strategic architecture of Belt and Road is this. When China builds a port in Sri Lanka, or a railway in Kenya, or a power grid in Pakistan, or a highway in Central Asia, China does not just gain an infrastructure asset. China gains a relationship of dependency, of economic integration, of political alignment. Because the country that built your infrastructure, that country holds leverage. Not military leverage, economic leverage. The leverage of being the partner that everyone needs for the next project, the next loan, the next upgrade. As of 2025, China has signed Belt and Road agreements with more than 150 countries. 150. That is more than 3/4 of every country on Earth. Connected to Chinese infrastructure, indebted to Chinese financing in many cases, economically integrated into Chinese trade networks. Now look at that map alongside the BRICS expansion map. BRICS, the bloc of major emerging economies, originally Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, expanded in 2024 to include Iran, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Ethiopia, and Argentina. The expanded BRICS bloc now represents 37% of global GDP. And the overlap between BRICS membership and Belt and Road participation is not coincidental. China has been quietly constructing an alternative international order, not through military force, not through invasion, through infrastructure, through finance, through trade, through the patient accumulation of economic relationships across a generation. And while everyone was watching Trump's tariffs and Trump's statements and Trump's political drama, that alternative order kept being built, one agreement at a time, one port at a time, one railway at a time. Now here is the piece that I want you to understand most deeply, because this is the piece that directly affects you, not as an abstract geopolitical spectator, as a person with money, with savings, with economic exposure to what happens when the structure of the global economy changes. The US dollar is the world's reserve currency. That means central banks everywhere hold dollars. Trade is priced in dollars. Commodities are priced in dollars. International debt is denominated in dollars. That status gives America what the French economist Valéry Giscard d'Estaing once called the exorbitant privilege. The privilege of being able to borrow cheaply, print money with limited consequences, sanction enemies by cutting off dollar access, and consume more than it produces because the world needs its currency. The exorbitant privilege has been the foundation of American economic dominance since 1944. And China's strategy, every piece of what I have described today, the Treasury bond sales, the CIPS alternative, the Yuan oil deals with Saudi Arabia, the Belt and Road infrastructure, the BRICS expansion, is aimed at one specific target, not at defeating America militarily, at eroding the exorbitant privilege, slowly, patiently, over decades, making the dollar slightly less inevitable, making yuan payments slightly more normal, making American financial leverage slightly less absolute. Because if the dollar loses even a portion of its reserve currency status, the economic consequences for ordinary Americans are severe and direct. Interest rates rise because America can no longer borrow so cheaply. Inflation rises because the export of inflation through dollar printing becomes harder. The cost of everything, gas, groceries, debt, mortgages, rises. This is not a theoretical future scenario. This is a process that has already begun. The share of global central bank reserves held in US dollars has fallen from 71% in 2000 to 58% in 2024. 13 percentage points in 24 years. Slow, consistent, quiet. While everyone watched the loudest voice in the room, China built the alternative room. I want to tell you about one more hidden fact that very few people have connected to the bigger picture. China increased its gold reserves for 18 consecutive months through 2024. 18 months, every single month, adding gold, moving assets from dollar-denominated form into gold. Gold is the asset that has no counterparty risk. Gold cannot be frozen by American sanctions. Gold cannot be made worthless by American Treasury policy. Gold is the asset you hold when you are preparing for a world where dollar dominance is less certain than it was. China is not alone in this. Russia has done the same. India has done the same. Turkey has done the same. Saudi Arabia has increased its gold holdings. The central banks of countries that represent a majority of the world's population are all simultaneously reducing dollar exposure and increasing gold holdings. The signal is clear to anyone who is paying attention. And this brings me to what I believe is the most important practical point of everything I have told you today. The world is being restructured, not through a war that everyone can see, not through a dramatic single moment of change that news cameras can capture, through the patient, systematic, consistent accumulation of alternative structures, alternative payment systems, alternative energy pricing currencies, alternative infrastructure networks, alternative diplomatic relationships, alternative reserve assets. This restructuring will not happen overnight, but it will happen. And when it does, the people who understood it in advance, who positioned their thinking and their financial strategy accordingly, will be in a completely different position from those who are watching the louder, more dramatic, more entertaining story. Here is what I observe about the people who consistently navigate these transitions well. They are not necessarily wealthier to start with. They are not necessarily better connected. They are not luckier. They think in systems. They see patterns. They understand that the visible drama is rarely where the consequential action is happening. They have built the financial intelligence to translate geopolitical analysis into practical decisions about their own money and their own future. That is not a natural gift. It is a built skill, and it can be built deliberately with the right framework. That is what the TPP system was designed to create, the mental and financial framework to think clearly about a world that is changing in ways most people do not see until it is too late to position intelligently. 60 days, full guarantee, zero risk. The link is in the description and the pinned comment. I want to tell you one last thing before I close. China's strategic patience is perhaps the single most consistently underestimated force in global politics. America thinks in 4-year election cycles. China thinks in decades. America reacts to the news cycle. China plans across generations. When Xi Jinping looks at the Trump phenomenon, the political drama, the noise, the uncertainty, the America First positioning that strains alliances and creates diplomatic vacuums, he does not see a threat. He sees an opportunity. Every time American leadership creates a vacuum, China steps into it. Every time American alliances are strained, China strengthens relationships with the frustrated parties. Every time American sanctions cut a country off from the dollar system, that country looks for alternatives. And China has been building those alternatives for 20 years. The question is not whether this transition is happening. The verified data I have shown you today proves that it is happening. The question is whether you understand what it means for your life, your economy, your financial security, and the world your children will inherit. Because understanding it changes what you do. And what you do is the only thing any of us actually controls. Let me give you my final assessment. Trump's political presence, whether at peak power or an absence from the picture, has served China's strategic interests in specific documented ways. Not because China caused it, but because China was prepared to use whatever the moment offered. That is the definition of strategic patience. That is the approach that has moved China from a developing economy in 1980 to the world's largest economy by purchasing power parity in 2024. That is the approach that has connected 150 countries to Chinese infrastructure, while American foreign policy debated itself. That is the approach that has quietly begun to crack the petrodollar, build the alternative payment system, accumulate gold, and position the yuan as a viable reserve currency alternative. Not finished, not complete, not victorious yet, but moving, always moving, while everyone watches the loudest voice in the room. I have spent 30 years telling you what is actually happening, behind what appears to be happening. The verified facts I showed you today are not speculation. They are not alarmism. They are documented data that anyone can find if they know where to look and how to read it. The world is being restructured. The only question is whether you are positioned to navigate that restructuring intelligently, or whether you are still watching the louder, more entertaining story while the consequential moves happen quietly. Subscribe. Come back for the next video, because the next one will show you something about this restructuring that will be even harder to look away from. This is Professor Jiang. Authentic, calculated, guaranteed. Stay sharp. The world is moving.